Should I take it away, Laura? Okay.
Take it away.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing so we have a little bit more of a personalized experience here. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today. My name is Michelle Pacansky-Brock, and I'm so honored to be invited to be your Flex keynote this week for your spring 2021 term. Ready or not, here it comes. So we are going to be in this together for the next hour and a half. And I wanted to just explain a couple of things. For this session today, we're using the webinar interface for Zoom. And what that means for you is that you don't have to worry about wondering if anyone can see you, first of all. Your webcam is turned off and your microphone is also turned off. However, we definitely want to encourage you to feel comfortable participating. The more that you can engage, the more it's going to improve my experience being on this awkward side where I can't see or hear anyone. Of course, it's going to improve your experience too. So let's talk about that part of it. At the bottom of your Zoom window in your Zoom toolbar, you're going to see a chat, which you're probably pretty used to seeing. So if you haven't yet, click on chat and open that up. And in the chat, we'd like to encourage you to toggle the blue button to, I'm not sure exactly what it says on your end. I think it says panelists and all attendees or everyone, something like that. So toggle it to panelists and attendees or everyone, and let us know how you're feeling today. Just do a quick check-in in the chat. How are you feeling today? Maybe, one or two words, a couple of adjectives. How are you feeling today? Sounds like a cold day down there in San Diego. Oh, right. So as we reflect on what we're seeing in the chat, there's a lot of positive feelings coming in. Someone's carbon monoxide detector went off last night. It always happens in the middle of the night. What's that about? It's so interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Some tired, but a lot of positivity. So I just want to acknowledge that. That's really helpful for me to know. It's helpful for you to know and do that check-in and just kind of get a check on how you're feeling. I encourage you to do that every day. If you don't, start your day that way. That's how I, over these past few months, have come to start my days. I do a check-in, and by doing that, I recognize how different I feel every day. And it gives me some data to kind of guide the rest of my day and be aware of, why I might be feeling like I can't take that on today. So being aware of how you're doing is really important. And if you're like me, you do find that things really change very frequently, sometimes hour by hour even. There's a lot of uncertainty out there, and that's really still impacting all of us. So thank you for sharing. So the chat is there for you to do check-ins, to share reflections. I also want to acknowledge the knowledge in the room. I know that when I was invited to speak with you folks, I realized that this is by no means an audience that is new to conversations about equity. I'm very aware of your commitment to equity at Mesa and Miramar. So I have so much admiration for that commitment and that culture that you're creating at your institutions and across your district. With regards to engagement, there's one more thing I want you to know about. In addition to the chat in your toolbar, you also see a button that says Q&A. If you have a question that you want to send directly to me to be answered, we'd like you to please put those questions to me in the Q&A area. And Laura Gonzalez is going to help me kind of keep tabs on those over the course of our time here together. Okay, so the chat is there for you to engage in a back channel, share resources. I know there's going to be lots of ideas from your own classes that relate to things we're talking about. So please share those there. The Q&A is for questions for me to answer. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to get started with a little bit of a reflection today. And the reflection that I'd like to ask you to engage in is one that's going to be personal to you. So I want to create a sense of safety here and be sure that you know that I'm not going to ask you to put this in the chat. This is just a personal reflection. I'd like you to think about a time in your life that you did not belong. I'd like you to think about a time in your life that you felt like you did not belong. And just take some time to reflect on that question. And when you start to filter through your past experiences and maybe start to settle on one particular memory or time in your life, try to imagine what that felt like. And I want to acknowledge that the way that you're feeling, the emotions that are coming back are not good emotions. And I want you to hold on to that, which is kind of a strange thing to ask you to do at the start of a session like this. But I think it's important. So as you hold on to that, I would now like to share a story with you. The story is from about 1.5 years ago. It's from before COVID. I was invited to attend my 30th high school reunion. I felt very reluctant about the idea of going. High school was not a time in my life that I enjoyed. When I look back on it, I'm not one of those people that are like, oh, high school is awesome. It was just, I didn't like high school. And I was kind of questioning whether or not I wanted to go back and attend this reunion. And I could sense my reluctance. And I could sense that I was coming up with all kinds of reasons that would validate why I should not go. And something inside me just said, Michelle, you're going to do this. And so I bought the ticket probably 6 to 8 months before the event. And then, of course, as the months started getting closer and closer, I started having all the anxiety, like, oh, what am I going to wear? Why am I doing this? It would just be easier not to go. I could sell my ticket to someone else. All the things were starting to surface inside me. And I got myself to go. And I remember getting to the venue and walking inside and feeling, I was getting kind of sweaty and my heart was beating really fast. And I was trying to tell myself to take deep breaths. And I got closer to the table, the check-in table, and I was kind of looking around trying to figure out what I was supposed to do. And a man came up to me. He was standing kind of off to the side of the table by himself. And he walked up to the table and he looked at me and he put his hand out and he said, "Hi, Michelle. I'm Andrew Rodriguez," which, by the way, is not his real name, for the record. And I looked at him. I looked at his face and I kind of scoured his face for, the remnants of something that looked familiar from 30 years ago. And I said, "I remember you. We had English together." And so we took just a couple of minutes to talk about that and to reflect on that English class and talk about our teacher and some of the memories that we had and talk about, where we live now and what's going on in our lives. And then we kind of, said, "Hey, have a good time tonight." And we went our separate ways. And after speaking with him instantly, I recognized in myself that I had confidence and the narrative inside of me shifted. And I told myself, "You can do this. You got this." And so I walked out and I enjoyed myself that night. I really enjoyed myself. And then as the night was ending, the crowd was starting to thin out. People were leaving. And I saw Andrew again, and he came up to me and he said, "Michelle, do you have a minute?" And I said, "Sure. How did you have a good time?" And I could tell from the look on his face that he was thinking about something kind of serious. And he said, he got a little bit closer to me, and he said in a quiet voice, he said, "I just want you to know that you are the only person here who remembered who I was." And that really meant a lot to me. And he and I started crying together. Our eyes filled with tears, and things kind of changed. The conversation that we had changed, and it went from the small talk about, "Oh, what's going on in your life?" And it went to this real conversation. We went to a vulnerable place, and we started talking about high school and how we never felt like we fit in, and how it was not a great time in our lives, and how we didn't want to be there that night, and we came anyway. And we exchanged phone numbers, and we left. So I share that story with you today because it really impacted me. And I'm someone, I consider myself, I'm always learning from life, always learning from life. And as a teacher, as a community college instructor, turned faculty developer, I started teaching in our system back in 1999. I've taught part-time, I've taught full-time. And for the past 10 years, I've been in a faculty support role, supporting faculty who teach online. And the more I can think about life in general and the human condition and make connections to my teaching, I think the better I get. And that was a day that I learned so much. I can remember thinking about everyone else there that night. And I can remember thinking about everybody in the same experience, but how it was so different depending on each person, what each person was, depending on the backgrounds and experiences that informed that moment for each individual. I thought about how much that connection I made with him helped me to give me confidence. And I thought about how not being seen by so many people negatively affected Andrew. And how just that one little me remembering him meant so much to him. And for me, it helps me to recognize when we think about the word relationships, relationships can be deep, long, and long lasting, or they can just be tiny little moments of human connection that happen at just the right time. And as educators, we have an incredibly special role in the lives of our students. And every time we teach a class, it's hard. Teaching is such hard work, but it's an opportunity to change a life forever. And that is very much true online, just like it's true in the classroom. So that's what we're here today to talk about, is why this is so important, particularly online, and even more so today as we embark upon the year 2021, wondering what happened the past year, where did it go, and what's ahead. There's still a lot of uncertainty. I don't have all the answers, but there's one thing that is sure, and it's that you are so important to your students, even if you're not sharing the same space with them. Okay, so on that note, I'm going to share my screen now and get started. So that little icebreaker that we did there, that story, is important. That's just a little lesson about belonging. And it's important to recognize that belonging is a basic human need. It is a basic human need. It's not some luxury. It's not some fluff that doesn't really matter. It is a basic human need. And it's also important to recognize that belonging is not the same as fitting in. Belonging is not the same as fitting in. Fitting in requires a person to change who they are and conform to something else. Belonging is being accepted for your true, authentic self. It's only when a person truly belongs that they can thrive and achieve their full potential. When a person doesn't belong, it's an effect of their social environment. It's not something inherently wrong with the person. And when we recognize that marginalization or minoritization is an active process, it's an active social process and not a trait of a person, that's huge, because what it does is it compels us to recognize that we are part of it, that we are complicit in the process of minoritizing, unless we commit to actively working to understand the experiences of those who are different from us and be intentional about creating inclusive environments. When a person continuously is expected to just fit in, it's dehumanizing and it's absolutely exhausting. And this presentation is going to help you see barriers that may exist within some of your courses or other aspects of your campus. I realize we have folks here who are not teachers, but in other roles. So we want to kind of extend this outside of the classroom also and think about how some of these barriers are leaving some students out. So before we get any further, it's important to realize that we're talking about changes in our brain. That process, that, or I should say, that experience of not belonging, it triggers dramatic changes inside of the human brain. In your brain, your limbic system handles emotions, and the cortex in your brain handles reason. Now, usually these two parts of the brain work cooperatively together. They're kind of going back and forth, negotiating what's happening in your world around you. During exposure to stress, the amygdala, which is part of the limbic system, sends signals to other parts of your brain to release stress hormones. This is referred to as an amygdala takeover, if you've ever heard that phrase. When that happens, a person begins to experience physical changes: sweaty hands and neck, faster heartbeat and breathing, right? All those things that I described when I was walking into my reunion. That is your body's natural reaction to a stressful situation. It's preparing your body to either defend itself or run away. This goes back to our basic human reactions. And we know this process as fight or flight, right? It's the same type of reaction that allows us to stay safe in the face of danger. And our body goes through the same changes in moments of stress. And all kinds of things trigger stress. And all kinds of things trigger not belonging. And I recognize my positionality in this conversation about belonging. And this is something I did think about that night at my reunion. You know, my privileges that I have, my white skin, my abled body, my cisgender, all of these things that give me kind of power in a social environment. And I thought about my classmates, and I think about my students, our students who don't have access to those privileges. So these are things that I reflect on very deeply. Racism is something that very much triggers these changes inside of a person. The point here is that emotions are so powerful. Emotions have the ability to derail our thought processes and take control of our actions. Yet in a college classroom, sometimes, depending on the way you teach, I realize we're all different, and some of you are going to say, not me, but in college classes, it can be the norm to expect students to check their emotions at the door. And it can be the norm for you as a college educator to not show emotions. White dominant culture is not a culture that embraces messy, sticky emotions, the squishy stuff, right? That's an influence of if you're feeling that way, if you identify with that, it's really important to recognize that that's an influence of our white dominant culture. But folks, we are educators, and our focus, if you're in a teaching role, is on teaching and learning. If we disregard the role of emotions in learning, we're leaving out many of our students. Now, leading neuroscientists Mary Helen Immordino Yang and Antonio Damasio have written, emotions are not just messy toddlers in a china shop running around breaking and obscuring delicate cognitive glassware. Instead, they are more like the shelves underlying the glassware. Without them, cognition has less support. That quote, when I heard it, was very powerful. And so it has become something that I like to share. It's one that's visual. And I find that when you have visual analogies, they really tend to stick with a person more. So I hope that sticks with you. Emotions don't just influence cognition. They're the ground floor of cognition. Recognizing and validating the role of emotions in learning and building that into your teaching or whatever it is that you bring to serve your students at your institution. If you're a counselor, if you're in a faculty support role, really, how can you weave that into what you do? Because that in and of itself is anti-racist. Okay, I want to say that again. Recognizing and validating the role of emotions in learning is anti-racist. I'm going to take just a second and look at our Q&A. Okay, I don't see a question yet, so okay, just wanted to check in there. When we teach online though, okay, so let's get to the nitty gritty here. When we teach online, our students aren't in front of us, right? We know this. And it's so much easier to relate to our students simply as names on a screen. It's easier in so many ways. It's easier workload wise, and it's easier emotionally, because the more we keep those emotions out of what we're doing, it's easier. Emotions make things heavier and harder and messier. It's when we start to recognize, at least in my mind anyway, that teaching really is an art. We can have our plan, but when we invite in all that other stuff, we've got to be able to adapt and know how to support the different needs of the humans that are in our class. So another reason why this is not a good thing to relate to our students as people, as words, or I should say names on a screen and nothing more than that, because we're more likely to let our unconscious biases guide us. We're more likely to lean on them. Dr. Donna Y. Ford says, the less we know about a person, the more we make up. And that's human nature to do that. So we need to create online classes that create space to get to know our students, that create space for them to share. Because the reality is that our students are so much more than names on a screen. We know this. They're humans from diverse backgrounds. And when they enter your course, each of them brings a rich collection of past experiences and perspectives. And we need to design online courses that make space for those experiences, all of those experiences. And that means also the difficult ones. Because within these experiences, many students bring internal narratives that have been shaped by their past, narratives about their own intellectual ability, influenced by past microaggressions, maybe from past teachers, past professors, messages, stereotypes, negative stereotypes about intellectual ability and who's good at a certain subject or who belongs in college. These internal narratives are more likely to influence our Black, Hispanic, our Latinx and other students of color, our Indigenous students, first generation college students, and low income students. And these negative mindsets, these narratives, they serve as cognitive underminers that shape what students, how they behave, what they think they can do, and what they actually do. These narratives can influence a student so much that they can make one mistake, and that one mistake can be evidence for them that they are not good enough. Now, if you're a California community college instructor, you know, which of course you're a California community college instructor, you know that you serve the most diverse group of students in the nation, our 2.1 million students. A recent study of 40,000 California community college students conducted by the Hope Center found that half of the student respondents reported being food insecure in the prior 30 days, and 60% were housing insecure within the previous year. Basic needs insecurity rates are highest for our Black and African American students, those who identify as LGBTQIA, those who are financially independent from their parents, those who have served in the military, former foster youth, and formerly incarcerated students. Each college class is a landscape of socio-psychological threats for many students. And these threats are barriers that can prevent them from achieving their full potential. And before I forget, if you're interested in learning more about this concept, there's a book that I'd like to recommend by Sia Verschelden. The book title is Bandwidth Recovery. And I'm going to take just a second to put that in the chat. Oops, forgot my text on the screen there. Sorry about that. Now, human connection is one antidote for these stressors. It's not the only antidote, but it's one antidote. It's a really important part of improving these stressors for our students. And understanding how to foster human connection online is even more critical in our COVID era, right? And it's going to continue to be so for quite some time. And I also want to acknowledge something important here. I know that I'm speaking to all of you as if you don't know this and as if you don't know how to foster connection and relationships online. And I want to recognize that some of the most amazing, knowledgeable educators I have ever worked with in this space of humanizing online teaching and learning are in attendance today. I want to recognize two people in particular, Katie Palacios and Denise Meduli-Williams, who I learn a ton from. I've learned a ton from over the years, and I continue to learn from. And I want to acknowledge that I know some of you love teaching online. And I want you to know that it's okay to say that. And we need to celebrate that because some people really need to hear that. And we don't often make space for that. So I want to make space for that right now. And I also want to stress that this problem of, the barriers of not having strong human connection naturally online, that's not a problem that a shiny new ed tech tool can solve. From my perspective, it's very common for institutions, for systems to turn to technologies to solve problems. Technology is part of this, don't get me wrong. When we're teaching online, technology has to be part of it because it's what mediates our interactions with our students. But it's you that's going to make the difference here. It's teaching that makes the difference here, not a tool. And that's really important to be said too. I don't think we use the word teaching enough in our system. Something to think about. But when we look at who succeeds in our courses, we know this. This is data from the California Community College system. It's not from your specific institutions from a few years ago. But we can see that the same student groups that are disproportionately impacted by basic needs are disproportionately impacted when we look at who succeeds in our courses and disaggregate that by race and ethnicity. So what this graph here shows is that 2015, 2016, the statewide success rate for online courses in our system, which means completing the course with an A, B, or C, was 66%. When we disaggregate this by the groups shown on the screen, only our white and Asian students exceed that. And looking at this data is really important. I'm going to make the assumption that it's something that you do regularly at your institution, something that you're aware of. A lot of institutions aren't there yet. But this is an indicator of equity, just being aware of what this data looks like disaggregated in this way. And looking at those gaps there, right? The space underneath the statewide average, that gap for our Black and African American students, the gap for our Indigenous students, the gap for our Hispanic, and the gap for our Pacific Islander students, looking at those as opportunity gaps, asking ourselves, not, those students, not pointing to our students as the problem and using a deficit mindset, but asking ourselves, what can we do to change what can we change about our processes? And what can we change about what we're doing? What can we change about the student experience to help improve that? And that's when when we start asking those questions, instead of thinking about our students as underprepared, instead of thinking about that, instead of recognizing that our students are prepared differently, and our job is to create environments that support that difference, that value that difference, and ensure that everybody is supported and has access to what they need to succeed so that they can achieve their full potential. That's when we are truly embracing equity and we have that equity mindset. Now, academic mindsets is a phrase from literature that I haven't been using this as much as I should be in my presentation. So I wanted to bring this in today because I was thinking about it over the weekend, and I thought, gosh, this is really important, and it might be something that helps to connect these ideas with something that you might be familiar with. Academic mindsets are beliefs, attitudes, or ways of perceiving oneself in relation to learning and intellectual work that promote academic performance. And in the literature, there are 4 components of academic mindset, and one is a sense of belonging, which is really what we've been honing in on here. But there are others that relate. I kind of see these as a fabric. There's something called the implicit theories of ability, which is where something like growth mindset fits in. And on the right side, you see this kind of personal quote, what a person would think if they've achieved this. So a student who's achieved this aspect of academic mindset would be thinking, my ability and competence grow with my effort. Self-efficacy equates to, I can succeed at this. And expectancy value theory equates to, this work has value for me. So those quotes on the right side, right? We need to think about what we're doing and creating environments that cue students, that send those cues on that right side and the right column. Those are the cues we want to be sending to our students. So our question becomes, if we think about learning as this integrated process that includes both emotion and cognition, right? How might we teach online in a way that supports those socio-psychological aspects of learning? How do we do that? That's our big question here today. I'm going to pause for just a second and take a look in the chat. I see a lot of interaction here, which is beautiful. It makes me happy to see that. And I see a lot of positive response and thank yous, references to more books. Thank you for sharing that. Pega, if I said that name right, I hope. Yeah. Lots of love for online teaching and love for Denise and Katie. Great. Okay. So we're going to watch a brief video here. This is a video that perhaps you've seen before. It has made its way into a lot of different professional development across the system. This is taken from a panel, and this is a student. This is actually a community college student who was on a panel at CSU Channel Islands several years ago. We're just going to take a listen to what he has to say about his experience in an online class. And when he's done, I want you to share in the chat. I want you to describe how he's feeling.
I can see that a professor isn't trying to interact with the course. And it's just little things like the automatic announcements that only show up at 12 a.m. on a Sunday. Like, you know, it's all automated. They're just not, or you leave a question and ask the professor and 3 weeks later you get a response. Like, that's when I start to judge, like, I just wish you wouldn't be here. Like, I wish you would focus your energy somewhere else because I'm not learning anything. But yeah, so that's the only judgment, is when you're not doing anything. We don't care when you make mistakes though.
Great. Okay, so let's take a moment and do a check-in here and yeah, share how he's feeling in a word or two. Okay. Frustrated, devalued, dehumanized, not important, alone, frustrated, discouraged, unseen. Yes, and Denise is pointing out, we don't care when you make mistakes, so let's remember that. Thanks for hearing that. Thanks for making that be seen, Denise. Frustration with automation, frustration, disappointment, unsupported, neglected. So these are negative emotions, clearly, right? So we can see how if that emotion is kind of what's lining his cognition, obviously that's not something that's going to encourage him to look forward to logging into that course, to feel good about it. He's not in a place where he's emotionally he's not in a good emotional place to learn. Okay, that's the bottom line here. And I want to just call out one more thing about those automated announcements that go off every week at 12 a.m. It's not to say that that's something to not use. I don't want anyone feeling shame if you do automated announcements, okay? There's no shame here, first of all. This is all about learning. I use automated announcements because I wake up at 3 a.m. and think, oh my gosh, I forgot to post that announcement. They're helpful to me. The point is that if that's your only presence, right? If that's the only presence that a student experiences from the instructor, they don't have that human connection, and that's a problem. So on the flip side, let's take a listen to this student's experience.
I feel that when the instructor assigns or gives us a due date, I feel that we need to be cognizant of that, respectful of that, and do our very best to get it done. However, there's the juxtaposition there is that we are taking online classes because we have life outside of the classroom. So the very reason that we are taking this communicates what we expect. Things happen. So being able to have that connection with your instructor and obviously be reasonable. For me, I was traveling a lot to see my mother-in-law who wasn't well, and we were getting stuck in airports, and I carry my desk everywhere with me, my little laptop and everything. And I also suffered, I had an accident where I suffered a TBI. I got in line, and I'm going to give her a big shout out, Cynthia Wilhelson from Cuesta College. I'm having a trouble here. I'm in Florida. I can't get to the pharmacy. And she just pushed it out a few days. I was able to breathe. I was able to get my work done. I'm going to cry. And that self-confidence came back. I did well. And I was so appreciative of that function. Very often I haven't seen it in a face-to-face class. Here's the due date. You show up to class, you show up to lab, and you're good to go. But this.
Okay, so how does this student feel, folks? Heard and valued, understood. She feels seen, cared for, valued, grateful, accommodated, supported, and capable. Right. She feels capable. Did you see that? Did you notice that how she reflected on what happened? She reflected on the difficult experience she was having. She clearly, first of all, it felt like the environment was safe enough where she could relay concern to her instructor about what was happening. She wanted to do well, and she had things getting in the way. She felt safe enough to share that, to give that to her instructor, and her instructor responded in a way that fostered trust, right? Validated what she was sharing and gave her an extension. And she said her confidence came back, her motivation came back, she did well. This is a clear example about how the way we teach impacts our students online. We tend to put a real focus on course design. The teaching part of it is critical. The teaching part of it. Those two things, they're different. They're related, but they're different. And this is a class that was taught by an engaged, empathetic instructor, someone who wanted to ensure that her students had what they needed to succeed. That is a course that
I
was
feel
taught
that
by an instructor with an equity mindset. Okay, so we already kind of deconstructed that a little bit. Real quickly, in 2016, there was a research study done on community college, online community college students, not in our state, actually in Virginia. But it looked at the different course design features in a course, and it looked at which course design features were correlated with student success, or in other words, higher course grades. And the only one that stood out was the quality of instructor to student interactions, not the quantity, the quality. So in the qualitative feedback from the students, the thing that rose to the surface was feeling like when students said they felt like there was an instructor who cared about their learning. That was the one thing more than any other course design element that rose to the top. And we also have lots of evidence from scholars that have been doing this work for decades that show that when, okay, not online, in a face-to-face environment, when students feel that they have an educator who validates them, it's what makes the difference. It's what shifts them from this mindset of I can't do this to I've got this, which is one of these academic mindsets. Doctors Luke Wood and Frank Harris also speak about the importance of cultivating those relationships before we get to content to ensure that our students feel seen, particularly our students who have never felt seen or valued by educators in the past. And we also know that education is not neutral. Classroom studies document the fact that underserved English learners, poor students, and students of color routinely receive less instruction and higher order skills development than other students. And what this does is it denies students the opportunity to engage in what neuroscientists call productive struggle that actually grows brain power. As a result, a disproportionate number of culturally and linguistically diverse students are what's known as dependent learners. And that's a quote from the amazing book by Zaretta Hammond, Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain, another one that I have with me at all times. I highly recommend. And if you're not sure what a dependent learner is, let's just take a look at these characteristics, because you have dependent learners in your classes. And when dependent learners learn online, they're more likely to be perceived on the other side of the screen as maybe someone who's just not engaged or doesn't care, because they're uncertain about how to tackle a new task. They need scaffolding to complete tasks. And if your course isn't designed that way, it's going to be a barrier for your students. And they will sit passively and wait if stuck until the teacher intervenes. So again, this is a continuum, not a dichotomy, moving from dependent to independent learner, but it's another reason why you matter so much. It's another reason why we need to be intrusive, what is a word that Luke Wood and Frank Harris use. Reach out to our students if they're not engaging. Find out what's happening on the other side, be there for them, and engage in something that is known as warm demand or pedagogy. It's a type of teaching that moves a student from a dependent to an independent learner. And it starts with cultivating those positive relationships with students and leveraging those relationships to increase academic performance. It's not about making things easier for our students. It's not about that. First of all, it's harder for us. This is hard, courageous work. It's easier to not do it. I want to be clear about that. But if we want our students to succeed, if we really want to make a difference and fill in those opportunity gaps, this is something that we have to recognize. And producing that academic that high level of academic work becomes a reciprocal obligation between a student and a teacher. You need to let your students know you're in it with them. They're more likely to push themselves and lean in and try harder. Okay, so human connection is an antidote to the threat, those threats that we started thinking about at the start. And that is harder, as I've mentioned. It requires us to go into a very vulnerable place. It's kind of like the feeling like moving from the seat down to the center on the stage and have all eyes on you. That is vulnerability. And vulnerability, in the work of Brene Brown, who I'm a huge fan of, she defines vulnerability as emotional risk and exposure. It's hard. It feels icky. It's also the core of meaningful human experiences. We go back to my story at the beginning, it's where Andrew and I connected at the end of the night, right? That's vulnerability. And it's also where innovation begins. It's where change starts. Vulnerability feels like weakness when we're doing it, but to everyone else, it looks like courage. And that's something that I hope you'll remember. Okay, so we are at a point now where we're going to take a 5-minute break. And before we do that, I'd like to invite you to just think about what's resonating with you right now and share it in the chat when 30 seconds are up. Just take 30 seconds for quiet and think about what's resonating with you. Okay, I invite you now to share in the chat. Just a brief description of what's sitting with you, what's kind of at the top of your mind right now. And I'm going to let those reflections just kind of come in as we take our 5-minute break. So you can use the next 5 minutes as you wish, folks. And then we're going to get into some practices about what we can do in our classes. Okay, so I'm going to mute and you're free to use these 5 minutes as you wish. We'll get started in 1 minute, folks. Okay, I messed with my timer there and I lost it, but I think, I think that was about 5 minutes. I'd like to acknowledge everyone for what you shared in the chat. Some of you have when you share, you have it toggled just to panelists, and if it just says panelists, that means only Laura and I can see it. So if that's you, I'd encourage you to copy and paste and resend it out to toggle it over to everyone. Because there's some really powerful reflections that came in. So thank you so much for sharing. And with the time that we have left together, we're going to now talk about what to do in your online classes and look at some examples. At the end of the presentation, I have a link to an infographic that will allow you to go a little bit deeper, but I want you to know that the slides I've prepared here are really intended to be a resource for you. So here is the link to the slides. I'm sorry if I forgot to share that earlier. We are starting with these principles of humanized online teaching, which are trust. And you'll notice that trust it undergirds everything. It's where we start. We have to trust our students. It's a personal commitment that we have to make as educators. And then as we teach online, we need to thread in presence, awareness, and empathy. And that can be really easy to say, but if you're someone who's never taken an online class with these elements woven into them, you don't know what it looks like to have an instructor on the other side of the screen who cares about you. Like, how do you convey that to lots of students? That can be a tricky thing. And one of the first important things to recognize is this beginning part of the semester, this week 0 through the end of week 1. This is a high opportunity zone. This is the time when students are thinking about their classes, they're getting nervous about them, they're wondering all kinds of things like, you know, what they're going to consist of, what they're going to look like, especially now, because an online class can mean so many different things right now. And that, if you're a student who's got 5 classes, that's a lot to unpack. That's a lot to coordinate. And the more we can let students know before a term begins, the better. And then also that first week, that's a time when we need to be upping the ante when it comes to building relationships. We need to really be stressing the relationship component of teaching and learning in that first week of the course before we get to the content in our course. So when it comes to humanized online teaching and learning, I'm part of a grant that is really working to put together a model of humanized online teaching and learning. We're focusing on STEM courses, but the model will extend to all disciplines. And we have compiled these 8 elements, and we're thinking about each one of these elements as a kindness cue of social inclusion. There's a theory in the research called Belongingness Uncertainty, and it comes from the Walton and Cohen, whose work is noted at the bottom of this slide. Belongingness uncertainty, it affects everyone, but it affects our students who are Black and Indigenous and Latinx more severely. It's been shown in the research. And so what that means is that we need to make an extreme effort, an extra effort to really create an environment where we value difference and where students feel supported and included early on. And one of these elements is something called a liquid syllabus. And I would like to play this quick video. It's a couple minutes long to introduce the idea of a liquid syllabus. And if anyone out there is using a liquid syllabus in some way, and I want to recognize that these practices should be adapted. You know, you might take something and put it right into your class the way we describe it. You may take it, reshape it, and sculpt it and fit it in a totally different way. And that's the beauty of teaching. These are not intended to be, best practices that have to be used this way. You work them into your teaching in a way that makes sense for you. So if you're using something like this, let us know in the chat and just share your experiences. If this is new to you, just focus on the video.
I know what you're thinking. I have a syllabus, and I've worked really hard on it. So why should I take the time to also create a liquid syllabus? And what does that mean anyway? After all, I already have my syllabus online in the form of a PDF, and I know all my students can access it in Canvas. But folks, the thing is, when your syllabus is behind a login screen, it may be tough for students to get to it from their phone. And no matter how lovely it looks on a computer, reading it on a mobile device is tough. The information in that syllabus is important, right? The bottom line is when we use tools designed for print products, they don't result in mobile-friendly experiences. And that's not good for our students. How might things change if you used a website tool like Google Sites or WordPress to create a liquid version of your syllabus? For just a moment, imagine being a student. It's the start of your first semester in college, and the week before class starts, you check your email and you get a friendly welcome message from your sociology instructor. It includes a button at the bottom to check the syllabus. You tap that button with your finger, and instantly you go to a syllabus that's easy to read and experience with the swipe of your finger. And you also discover something pretty special at the top.
Hi scholars, my name is Katie Whitman Conklin and I'm going to be your instructor this semester. A little bit about me, I lived in the Central Valley of California for a lot of years with my husband and children while he was stationed there with the Navy. And when he retired, we moved to northern Idaho where we now live with our kids on a family ranch.
You think to yourself, hey, I'm going to love this class. I can't wait to get started. But you know what? That's not the only benefit of a liquid syllabus. Since it lives on the web, it's shareable with a simple link. That means you can place that link in as many other places as you'd like. How about adding it next to your course description in your college's class schedule, or on your profile page on your college website, or a link on your own professional website? And you know what can really help promote your course and encourage more students to enroll? That's right, share it on Twitter. When we design with web tools, we create mobile-friendly content that supports our students in so many ways. It also lets them know we care.
Okay, let me address a couple questions that are coming up in the chat. First of all, the tool. The liquid syllabus is intentionally created with a website tool. So instead of having an export like a PDF, it uses a website tool like Google Sites. Another website tool that is popular is called WordPress. There are lots of different tools. And so it's not about saying that you have to use this one tool. It's a concept and the reason why a website, and someone mentioned Google Docs. So Google Docs is another super great tool to use for a syllabus. It allows for multiple export formats from students. They can download it as a PDF or a Word doc or just leave it on the screen. But what you can't do in Google Docs is embed a video. So you can put a video in there, but it's a link. And on Google Sites, you can embed a video so it shows up and your smiling face is what greets your students. And that's an important part of this, is bringing in your human presence. So students see you, you're there to greet them just like you would greet them at the door, right, of your classroom. So we're thinking about sending kindness cues of social inclusion, letting students know that, you trust them. You're sharing something about yourself in that video that's referred to as Selective Vulnerability by Zaretta Hammond. You're letting them know that you're here for them. You're in this with them. So again, created with the website tool, I recommend Google Sites because it's free and easy to use. It has a drag drop interface. It's public, which means they're not greeted with a login screen, which can be a barrier for some students if it's a student's first semester and you're sending this out the week before classes, I have a son right now who's starting at a community college this semester, and I asked him something about Canvas, and he looked at me and said, "What's Canvas?" Right? So we want to be sure that they can get access to what they need without needing to know how to do something else first. And so also ensuring that it's phone friendly, rendering on a mobile device in a way that is easy to read. And that's what modern website tools, website creation tools are designed to do. They're mobile responsive, ensuring the content is accessible. And I have a list of some of the components that we recommend, starting with that brief, imperfect, captioned welcome video from you, written with welcoming, hopeful language. Look at all of the different things, the components, the writing in that syllabus, and ask yourselves if you can tweak them and rephrase things in a way that is a little bit more hopeful and welcoming. Tips for success, demystifying how to be successful. So students can look at it and say, I can do this. I know what I'm supposed to do. A learning pact, which I'll show you in a moment, and inclusive images. This is my liquid syllabus, and I'm happy to put this link in the chat if you'd like to open it on your side. I recommend that you look at it on a phone. I know it's kind of a long link to type in. But this is my video at the top that you're welcome to go back and watch. I recorded this with my phone. This is about low stakes, simple tools. I recorded it with my phone like this in my backyard. Chickens, my neighbor's chickens going in the background. Welcoming students to the class, letting them know that I'm here because I want to be here, because I love to teach, and I love to teach online. That's the first message I want my students to hear. And I also acknowledge that things are tough right now. I have my commitment to my students. This video here, I'm going to talk about the wisdom wall in a minute, but it's a video clip of my past students sharing advice for my incoming students. So right off the bat, I want them to listen to my past students. When students have an opportunity to hear from students, they listen so much more. It resonates in such a different way. So this feedback here, this is golden. How the course works, I'm breaking it down for them. When it starts, there's no textbook, we're not going to meet in Zoom, all the things that they need to know for week 1. My teaching philosophy. I have a little video over here titled, How is Cioppino Like Our Class? And it shows me in the kitchen, getting out all my ingredients to make my cioppino, which is an Italian fish stew. And I talk about how it's all these different ingredients, the differences that make it delicious, just like the differences that they bring, that our students bring to the class that make our learning community vibrant. Really trying to emphasize valuing diversity. And then a pact is another element that sends that cue that I'm in this with my students without actually saying that, right? But I'm telling them, here's a list of what you can expect from me, and here's a list of what I will expect from you. And then number 8 on each side, I'm inviting them in. And what do you want to add to this list? So they're seeing this in the liquid syllabus before the class starts. And then when the class opens, they see it again in that first module in a discussion where I ask them to read it. And I ask them to either agree to our pact or add something to it that they think is missing. So really inviting them in. My equity statement and another little video. This is from my Let's Get Real series. How is a due date like a bullseye? So this is something that that takes away a lot of anxiety from students when they understand that my philosophy is due dates exist because they keep you on track. And I, as an online teacher, know that getting behind is the #1 thing that will derail a student. And that's why these due dates are so important to me. And I'm here to ensure that you know that and to try to help keep you on track. But if you miss a due date, do not drop this class. Do not think that you can't just pick up that dart and throw it again. It's just like trying to hit a bullseye. There's no shame in that. Things happen to everyone. And then a week 1 success kit. So I lay it out for my students. What does week 1 look like? What are the due dates? And what is one way to go about structuring your first week? And so this is just a suggestion for a success plan. And you'll notice on Saturday and Sunday, it says, or take a break. So I want students to know that it's not about always being busy. You should be taking breaks, hopefully, from the class. And that's important. It's important to have breathers. So then I have my 6 tips for success and how to get answers. So this is all on one page. I know that scrolling is not helpful for many people, but I'm trying to get back to the top. Sorry about that. This is the only page here. I'm taking a lot of time on this, but I want to show you something about Google Sites. I'm going to go into the edit mode. I'm going to go over to pages. You'll see that right now, home is lit up and in blue. That means that I've only published the home page of my Google site. But you'll see that there are 4 other pages. So what I do is I send this out before the class starts with just that home page published, that page that I just went through with you, because I want my students to have what they need. I don't want them to get overloaded with all this other stuff yet. And then when the course starts, I go in and I do this. For each page, I select show and navigation. And then I choose publish. It gives me it'll show me what it looks like before and after. And now if I go over to view published site, you'll see that all these pages are now published. So that's a way that I can kind of control the content to be sure that students have what they need, but not more than they need. And oftentimes, we have a way of giving everything to our students at once, which may not be a good thing. Yes, and someone is asking for the link. There's the link to my liquid syllabus. I have a couple of other examples here. These are links on my slides, so please feel free to reference the slides later and go back and look at them. And when you do that, this button here, learn how to create your own liquid syllabus, is going to take you out to a public Canvas course that we used as part of our Humanizing challenge. It'll walk you through how to create one. If you're interested in doing that, maybe next semester, doesn't have to be now. Remember to be keeping tabs on where you're feeling. And I know that there are many of you right now that feel very overloaded. So that needs to be acknowledged. This is like teaching online classes, like building a skyscraper. Okay, go one floor at a time, folks. Here's an example of a learning pact. This is the text from my liquid syllabus, which you're welcome to copy and paste, adapt without permission. This is shared in the public domain. Sharing is so important, and I hope that many of you will share back and share what your ideas are too, because the more we share, the more we can innovate and learn from one another. Making your learning environment as phone-friendly as possible is anti-racist also. We know that more community college students than we know that community college students, more of them own a smartphone than a laptop in the nation. This is national data, not our system data. I wish we had this data for our system, and if anyone knows that we do, please send me an email and let me know. Factors that increase smartphone ownership in the US is if an adult over the age of 18 is low income. The younger a person is, they're more likely to have a smartphone, and if they're Black or Hispanic. And also, and this is why it's specifically anti-racist, more US adults lean on a smartphone for broadband access, and meaning they have a smartphone and that's what they use, but they don't have broadband at home to connect a laptop to or something like that. So a little bit of a different way of looking at device ownership. But this is a really important point. And again, remember to start that liquid syllabus with a brief, imperfect welcome video from you. And I have an example here from Maritez Apigo, who teaches ESL and English at Contra Costa College. In that video, or in videos in general, maybe not, in videos in general, as you start to record these brief, imperfect 2-minute, 1-minute, 30-second videos that are so important, be vulnerable. Don't try to be perfect, be you. Shared vulnerability fosters empathy. It's actually proven in neuroscience. When you hear someone telling a story, being vulnerable, the same parts of your brain light up that light up in that person's brain. That was happening at the start of this presentation when I was sharing my story. That was us connecting with each other just through shared vulnerability. So be you, and don't forget accurate captions. I'm going to not show this right now. I'm going to skip past this, but a homepage. What does your homepage look like? That's another place where a video should live. Welcome your students there. Give them some tips to be successful. Be sure that they know what they're supposed to do next, and make that homepage minimal so it's nice and clear to them. And here is the spectacular Denise Meduli-Williams modeling warm demander pedagogy in an asynchronous online course.
Hi to all my online students. Here we are starting week 2. I just pulled up onto campus and I wanted to tell you everything's live on Canvas. The module's ready to go. I really enjoyed meeting you and learning all about you on our week 1 Flipgrid and our student survey. And I can't wait to get into week 2. You're going to be starting your first multi-draft essay. So as I walk on campus, I also wanted to let you know.
Oops, I was going to pause it there for the sake of time. Obviously, this is pre-COVID, but Denise uses a video tool called Clips, which maybe she wants to share a little bit more about. But if you have an iPhone, it is native. I believe it's native on your iPhone, or maybe you have to download it. I can't remember. But it's an easy way to record videos and share them. You could take that video and download it to your phone and then upload it into Canvas Studio or into YouTube. You can actually, the captions are burned right in there automatically. It actually listens to your voice and creates the captions as you speak, and you can just adjust them for accuracy before you're done. But these low stake videos are golden, folks. They're really, really golden. I think that that's the most underutilized tool for asynchronous online courses. A getting to know you survey is something that is not hard to put together. You can use the survey tool right in Canvas, and at the bottom of the screen, there's some information about how to search for an existing model of such survey in the Canvas Commons that you can bring right into your Canvas course. A getting to know you survey, if you have your students complete this in week 1, it sends the cue that you want to know about them and that you want to know how to support them. So you can ask them things like, what are your pronouns, if that's something that isn't part of your Canvas profile field. You can say, I will leave you feedback in video format. Does that work for you? Give your students the power to decide if that's something they want or not. And if they say no, it doesn't matter why. It's not up to us to judge. It doesn't even matter why they say no. It's just up to us to know and to respond to that. That also takes care of accessibility concerns and eliminates, the need to ensure that everything's accurately captioned. I mean, if you can have it captioned, great. Captions always benefit everyone, but we don't want that to be a reason to not use video for feedback, because there's research that shows that when students get feedback in voice or video, it's much more impactful than writing. Students are less likely to take your messages critically, less likely to misunderstand your tone and your intention behind the feedback. So it's a very powerful humanizing element to integrate into your courses. And then these last 2 questions, in one word, describe how you're feeling about this class. The responses to this question, folks, will illuminate who your high opportunity students are. Your students who really need your high touch that first week. It's not going to be everyone. It doesn't mean everyone needs to get a personalized video from you, but you might have 10 students in a class that say they're overwhelmed, that say they're lost, right? Those are the students who need you. They need you. They need your intrusive, warm demander self. And please share one thing that may interfere with your success in this class. That's when students have an opportunity to really convey to you what's going on if they feel comfortable sharing with that. And you can use that to support them as the class moves forward. And that's what we refer to as adapting your teaching. Adapt your teaching so that it meets the needs of who your students are. Every student has different needs. Some are going to need more from you than others. Take notes about what you learned from the survey. Turn on the notes column in the Canvas gradebook. Greatest little discovery ever if it's not on already. Only you see what you put in the notes column in the Canvas gradebook. Take notes from the survey so you remember things about your students. Track your students' activity and performance. Reach out, check in with them in friendly ways. Use their name in the subject line. Say, Carlos, is everything okay on your end? Instead of missing assignment. Think about the words that you're using. And then when you do leave feedback, and be sure to leave feedback, record voice and video feedback in the gradebook for those high opportunity students. Okay, again, if you have the space to do that, folks, it's an incredible gift to give to your students. In week 1, include a self-affirming icebreaker. What this means is an icebreaker that doesn't get into academic work. It doesn't get into the class. It gets into having students think about their lives and sharing something that's valuable to them. I have a wonderful video here from Fabiola Torres. This is her video prompt for her icebreaker.
Back in 1990, when I was in high school, I loved to dance. Today, I still dance by myself in my house.
Gets me every time. I love seeing her little dog look at her with its tail wagging. It's just so cute. So again, selective vulnerability, right? Fabi is showing herself, her non-academic self, letting part of her life in for her students, and asking them, you know, what do you still love to do? So it's really focusing on the positive aspects, the things that students feel proud about sharing. And another wonderful idea from Denise Maduli-Williams is, what will you hold on to? And Denise uses Flipgrid for this. And what I love, there's so many things I love about this, but it encourages the use of video for responding to a prompt, but it doesn't require students to aim the camera at their face. So by asking them to find an object and share something that they will hold on to, something that's important to them, they talk about the object, right? So they're still talking, they're still engaging, they're still reflecting and sharing. And all these differences are flooding into the class, and students are able to make these meaningful connections because they're seeing things like, oh, I know what that is. I recognize that symbol. And it creates these connections and takes the edge off of, you know, having to be the one on the video. And then the wisdom wall, which I already introduced a little bit just a few minutes ago on my liquid syllabus. This is an older version of mine, but I start at the end, okay, blah. If I were to do a wisdom wall for the first time, this is how it would work. So if you're interested in doing this, I'm going to cut to the chase. You'd actually wait until the end of your class. You'd wait until the last week of your online class, and you'd ask your students, think back to week 1. How were you feeling then? What do you know now about the class that you wish you had known then? You will be amazed at what students share, and let them know. Record your comments, share what it is that you wish you knew then, and share it in the form of advice for my next group of students. So when students go into it, they know that I'm going to be sharing it outside of the course. So they're making choices. That's included in the activity. And so it says, by sharing, you are acknowledging that I will share this outside of our class, which gets rid of FERPA concerns. The things they share are amazing. You will learn so much. And I promise you, you're going to hear amazing things. You're going to hear good things. It's just incredibly helpful for me as well as for my students. And then you share that with the next group of students when they come in. And then the last two elements are simply different ways of using videos. Bumper videos, we encourage the use of a tool called Adobe Spark because it's a more creative way of using video. It doesn't show your face. It allows you to record an audio track and pull in images and icons and text for the actual video part of it. And it's easy to use. It works on a mobile device. It also works on a computer to create, of course, is playback also. And yeah, we have faculty who just really like Adobe Spark, particularly those who don't feel too great about showing themselves on video, which is, that's your prerogative. This might be a better place for you to start with video. I'm going to let you play that because I want to have time for a couple of questions. And this is another example of a bumper video, kind of well, I should say the Matt Mooney example, the one on the previous slide, was taking a sticky concept from a module and creating a 2 to 3 minute video set to music about that demystifies it. This bumper video is really more like digital storytelling. Michelle McFarlane is talking about why she named her student Q&A discussion the truck stop. And she's telling a story about her own upbringing and how she sees a truck stop as this place where the community comes together to share and connect. And this is in an agriculture class, so it's kind of an interesting connection there. And then I have some links to my Let's Get Real videos here if you want to check those out. And then micro lectures are another option to consider, which of course it's using video to deliver content, but videos that are no longer than 10 minutes, aiming for 5 to 10 minutes, because that will create a usable video that students are more likely to watch. And they're also easier for you to maintain over time than long videos. So this is the infographic. Sorry about that. This is the infographic that I mentioned. Let me get that link for you. I'll put it in the chat if you'd like to take a peek at it now. Of course, the link is also on that slide in our presentation. I just want to remind all of you to be human and not perfect. Remember that teaching online is like building a skyscraper. If you feel the need to do all of this right now, you need to walk away from the computer and take a deep breath and kind of convince yourself that that's not a good idea. I know it's overwhelming. What we're doing is so hard work, such hard work, and it's never been harder. So give yourself grace, take on what you can take on, write down what you want to do next fall. If that makes you feel better, maybe a commitment to like next fall, I'm going to try this, and revisit that as you get closer to that time period. We have to slow roll that. Okay, so I'm going to go over to our Q&A and take a look at what's happening there. We've got a few minutes left. So Todd Curran is asking, Michelle, how do you balance the ability to be flexible with your students on due dates and not be taken advantage of from students who seem to have excuses time and time again? So here's the thing, Todd. I don't find that my students do that. I find that that was a fear I had was going to happen. I find that when I create an environment where I value and trust my students and I lean in and they know that, they are more likely to value and trust me. And I hear the exact opposite. I have students who come to me saying things like, I'm so sorry, I really want to make this work, but they're still cautious about asking for due dates. So that's how I respond to that. And I want to encourage anyone who has a different response to Todd to share in the chat. The more we humanize, Brene Brown has this great, she says something like, people are really hard to unlike close up. And I really believe that. Like the more we create a community where we're there for one another, with connections, with caring, the less likely people are to take advantage of each other. And that's just the only way I can say that. And let's see. So Michelle Steele is asking, do you offer courses on the ins and outs of building a liquid syllabus? So we have a public Canvas course that I linked to on my earlier slide that is self-paced, that walks you through how to create a liquid syllabus. @ONE has a 4-week equity and culturally responsive online teaching course that we offer throughout the year. It is facilitated, so we meet the capacity and then it closes, and but it's a facilitated 4-week course, and the outcome of that is redesigning your syllabus. One of the options is to create a liquid syllabus. So that's something to be aware of also. So Carmen is asking about Popular, POPULR, as a resource or a tool for creating a liquid syllabus. So that's actually the tool that I started with back in 2014. And the reason I moved away from it was due to accessibility problems. Popular is an easy to use tool. It creates a website. It checks a lot of the boxes, but when it comes to accessibility, you are restricted by the tool as to how accessible the site is that you create. So unless they've changed things, and if they have, let me know. But at the time, there was no way to add alt text to an image in Popular. And so that was something I reached out to the CEO, and they said they were going to add that, and they never did. And then in the meantime, Google Sites came out with this new interface and really made a commitment to accessibility. And that's why I shifted and recommend it instead of Popular. So I hope that's helpful. And we are at time, so I'm going to take a moment to just extend a gracious thank you to each of you. You've been an amazing group to be with this past hour and a half. I know that's a lot of time to hang in there. I hope that you have lots of resources and ideas, but not too many. Do remember to give yourself grace and make time for yourself. I know that's incredibly difficult, but so important in this time. So thank you for all that you do for our students. You're amazing, and have a wonderful term. If you're on Twitter, connect with me at Brocansky, BROCANSKY. Thanks for having me. Bye.